The Atlantic Ocean has always commanded respect. For centuries, sailors crossed its vast waters knowing that no matter how advanced their ships became, nature always had the final word. Storms appeared without warning. Thick fog swallowed entire fleets. Towering waves could reduce even the strongest vessels to drifting wreckage. Yet, by the beginning of the 20th century, something remarkable had changed. Humanity had entered an age unlike any before it. Factories roared across Europe and North America. Steel bridges stretched over rivers that once seemed impossible to cross. Electricity illuminated cities throughout the night, while railroads connected distant nations at unprecedented speed. Every year brought another invention that convinced people the impossible no longer existed. It was an era defined by confidence. Many believed that science and engineering had finally overcome the greatest challenges nature could offer. The future seemed limitless, and nowhere was that optimism more visible than in the race to dominate the Atlantic Ocean. Crossing the Atlantic was no longer simply a journey. It was a statement of wealth, power, and national pride. Shipping companies competed fiercely to build larger, faster, and more luxurious ocean liners. Every new vessel promised greater comfort, greater prestige, and greater technological achievement than the one before it. Among these companies, one name stood above the rest: the White Star Line. Its executives believed the future of ocean travel would not belong to the fastest ship, but to the most comfortable and elegant one. They envisioned floating palaces where passengers could experience luxury, unlike anything ever seen at sea. To turn that vision into reality, they approved a project so ambitious that it would capture the attention of the entire world. 3 nearly identical giants would be constructed: Olympic, Titanic, Britannic. Together, they would redefine ocean travel forever. Of those 3 names, one would become immortal: Titanic. Even before construction began, newspapers described the project as a triumph of modern engineering. Shipbuilders, investors, politicians, and ordinary citizens followed every announcement with fascination. The scale of the project seemed almost unbelievable. Never before had humanity attempted to build a passenger ship of such enormous size. The vessel would stretch more than 269 meters from bow to stern. It would rise like a moving city above the waterline, carrying thousands of passengers, hundreds of crew members, and every luxury imaginable. Inside, travelers would find grand staircases carved from oak, glittering chandeliers, elegant dining rooms, Turkish baths, a swimming pool, libraries, cafes, smoking lounges, squash courts, and suites rivaling the finest hotels in Europe. For the wealthy, the voyage itself became part of the destination. For immigrants traveling in third class, Titanic represented something entirely different: hope. Families from Ireland, Scandinavia, Eastern Europe, and countless other regions boarded ships bound for America with dreams of new opportunities. Some carried little more than a suitcase and a handful of possessions. They left behind poverty, war, or uncertainty, believing the other side of the Atlantic offered a better future. Remarkably, even third-class accommodations aboard Titanic exceeded the standards found on many competing ships. This extraordinary combination of luxury, innovation, and opportunity transformed Titanic into far more than an ocean liner. It became a symbol of an era convinced that progress had no limits, an era that believed technology could conquer nature itself. No one could have imagined that within only a few years, that belief would be tested in the most devastating way imaginable. Because while newspapers celebrated Titanic as the greatest ship ever built, far away in the icy waters of the North Atlantic, the forces that would one day decide her fate already existed. The iceberg had not yet entered the story, but destiny had already begun moving silently toward one unforgettable night. The story of Titanic cannot be understood without first understanding the world that created her. At the dawn of the 20th century, Britain stood at the center of global trade. The British Empire stretched across continents, and the Atlantic Ocean served as one of the busiest highways on Earth. Every week, thousands of passengers crossed between Europe and North America. Some traveled for business, others for pleasure, and countless families crossed the ocean in search of a better life. The demand for faster and more comfortable ships grew every year. For decades, two companies dominated this prestigious market. One was Cunard Line, the other was White Star Line. Their rivalry became legendary. Every new ship launched by one company forced the other to respond with something even greater. Newspapers covered these competitions with excitement, comparing speed records, passenger capacity, and luxurious accommodations as though they were sporting events. In 1906, Cunard shocked the maritime world. They introduced two revolutionary ocean liners, Lusitania and Mauretania. These ships were not only beautiful, they were astonishingly fast. Powered by advanced steam turbines, they shattered Atlantic crossing records and quickly became symbols of British engineering. White Star Line faced a difficult decision. Attempting to build an even faster ship would require enormous investment, with no guarantee of success. Instead, company chairman J. Bruce Ismay believed victory could be achieved in another way. If Cunard owned the fastest ships, White Star would build the most magnificent ships ever seen. Passengers, he believed, would gladly sacrifice a few hours of travel in exchange for unmatched luxury, comfort, and elegance. It was a bold strategy. One meeting would change everything. In 1907, J. Bruce Ismay met with William James Peary, chairman of the famous Belfast shipbuilding company, Harland and Wolff. Together they imagined ships unlike anything the world had ever witnessed. Not one giant, but three. The Olympic-class liners. Each vessel would represent the absolute peak of modern engineering. Every detail was designed to impress. The dining rooms would resemble those of Europe's finest hotels. The grand staircase would become one of the most recognizable interiors ever built aboard a ship. Private suites would rival luxurious mansions. Electric elevators would transport passengers between decks. Even the lighting, furniture, carpets, and tableware were selected with extraordinary care. No expense would be spared. Construction began in Belfast, Northern Ireland. Thousands of skilled workers arrived every morning before sunrise. Steel workers, carpenters, electricians, engineers, riveters, painters. More than 15,000 men contributed to the construction of Titanic. The shipyard itself became a city within a city. Towering cranes dominated the skyline. The constant sound of hammers striking hot steel echoed across Belfast from dawn until dusk. Millions of rivets held together thousands of massive steel plates. Every section had to fit with incredible precision. Building Titanic required techniques that had never before been attempted on such a scale. For many workers, the project became a source of immense pride. They believed they were building the greatest ship humanity had ever created. Yet the work was also dangerous. Safety standards were far less advanced than they are today. Falls, crushing injuries, and accidents were tragically common. Several workers lost their lives during construction, while many others suffered serious injuries. These sacrifices rarely appeared in newspaper headlines. Instead, the public saw only photographs of a magnificent vessel slowly taking shape. As Titanic's enormous hull grew larger each month, crowds gathered outside the shipyard simply to admire it. People struggled to comprehend its true size. Standing beside ordinary buildings, the ship appeared almost impossible. She seemed less like a vessel and more like a floating city. For those watching from below, it was difficult to imagine that anything so enormous could ever disappear beneath the sea. That belief would soon spread across the entire world. And with every newspaper article praising her strength, with every photograph celebrating her beauty, with every conversation describing her as the safest ship ever built, the legend of the unsinkable Titanic quietly began to grow. It was a legend that millions would eventually remember. But like many legends, the truth was far more complicated. The belief that Titanic was completely unsinkable has survived for more than a century. It appears in movies, books, documentaries, and everyday conversations. But was it ever actually true? The answer is more complicated than most people realize. Neither the engineers who designed Titanic nor the shipbuilders who constructed her officially claimed that the vessel could never sink. Instead, they described her as one of the safest passenger ships ever built. For its time, that claim was entirely justified. Titanic incorporated some of the most advanced safety features available in the early 20th century. One of its greatest innovations was a system of 16 watertight compartments. Massive steel doors separated different sections of the hull. If water entered one compartment, the doors could be closed, preventing flooding from spreading throughout the ship. In theory, Titanic could remain afloat even if several compartments were flooded. It was a remarkable engineering achievement. No passenger liner before it had been built on such an ambitious scale. To the public, however, these technical explanations slowly transformed into something much more dramatic. Newspapers praised the ship's incredible design. Magazine articles described her as practically unsinkable. Passengers repeated these stories to friends and family. Over time, careful engineering language evolved into absolute confidence. The distinction was subtle but important. A ship designed to survive serious damage gradually became, in the public imagination, a ship that could survive anything. Confidence spread everywhere. Investors felt reassured. Passengers booked tickets months in advance. Crew members believed they were serving aboard the finest vessel ever launched. Even experienced sailors admired the scale of what had been achieved. The atmosphere surrounding Titanic was unlike anything seen before. It represented more than transportation. It represented human progress itself. Every polished brass railing, every enormous steam boiler, every luxurious cabin, every shining deck sent the same message: the future had arrived. Yet history has often shown that progress can create a dangerous illusion. When people believe their technology is nearly perfect, they sometimes become less prepared for the unexpected. This was not unique to Titanic. Throughout history, civilizations have repeatedly discovered that confidence without caution can carry an enormous price. As Titanic prepared for her maiden voyage, almost nobody imagined disaster. Instead, newspapers focused on celebrity passengers, business leaders, millionaires, politicians, artists, families beginning new lives in America. Every ticket represented a different dream. For first-class passengers, the voyage offered unmatched luxury. For second-class travelers, it offered comfort beyond what most had ever experienced. For thousands in third class, it offered hope. Hope for employment, hope for freedom, hope for a future their children could never have enjoyed in Europe. These different worlds would soon exist together aboard a single ship. Some dined beneath glittering chandeliers. Others gathered in modest dining halls, laughing with relatives as they discussed the lives waiting across the Atlantic. Although separated by class, everyone shared one belief. They trusted the ship beneath their feet. No one packed their luggage expecting never to return. No parent tucked a child into bed believing those moments might be their last. No musician rehearsed for evening performances imagining they would one day become symbols of courage. The voyage had not even begun. Yet every life aboard Titanic was already quietly moving toward the same unforgettable night. On the morning of April 10, 1912, crowds gathered along the docks at Southampton, England. Some came to board. Others came simply to watch. The excitement was impossible to ignore. Towering over the harbor, Titanic looked less like a passenger ship and more like a steel skyscraper floating on water. Her four massive funnels dominated the skyline. Her freshly painted hull stretched farther than many people had ever walked in a single minute. Steam drifted gently into the cool morning air. Dock workers hurried along the pier. Porters carried trunks filled with elegant clothing, family heirlooms, and everything passengers believed they would need in the new world. Children pointed toward the enormous ship with expressions of amazement. Photographers captured what many believed would become one of the greatest voyages in maritime history. No one standing on the dock that morning could have imagined that these ordinary moments, the waving hands, the smiling families, the final embraces, would one day become some of the most haunting images in history. As departure time drew closer, Southampton Harbor became a sea of emotion. Families embraced one another for what they believed would be only a temporary goodbye. Husbands promised to write as soon as they arrived in New York. Mothers adjusted their children's coats one final time before boarding. Friends exchanged handshakes, laughter, and confident smiles. For many, this was not simply another voyage. It was the beginning of an entirely new chapter in life. Among the passengers were some of the wealthiest people on Earth: industrialists, bankers, writers, business magnates. Their names regularly appeared in newspapers, and many of them traveled with servants, expensive luggage, and wardrobes that reflected extraordinary privilege. For them, Titanic represented the highest standard of luxury ever offered at sea. Yet only a few decks below, another world existed. Third-class passengers came from dozens of different countries. Many had sold nearly everything they owned to purchase a single ticket. Some carried family photographs carefully wrapped in cloth. Others brought handwritten letters from relatives who had already settled in America, describing opportunities that seemed almost impossible back home. To these families, New York was more than a destination. It was hope itself. The ship connected people from remarkably different backgrounds. Millionaires walked the same decks as farmers. Successful businessmen sailed alongside blacksmiths, teachers, musicians, carpenters, nurses, and children who had never before seen the open ocean. More than 30 nationalities were represented aboard Titanic. Different languages echoed through the corridors. Different cultures shared the same voyage. For a brief moment in history, thousands of individual stories became part of one extraordinary journey. At exactly noon on April 10, 1912, powerful tugboats began guiding Titanic away from the dock. Passengers gathered along the rails, waving enthusiastically toward the crowds that had assembled on shore. Handkerchiefs fluttered through the air. Bands played cheerful music. Steam whistles echoed across the harbor. Slowly, almost gracefully, the largest moving object ever built by human hands began its first voyage. No one noticed the first warning. As Titanic moved through the harbor, the enormous displacement of water generated by her massive hull created powerful currents. Nearby lay another passenger ship, the SS New York. Without warning, the rushing water caused the smaller vessel's mooring ropes to snap. The New York began drifting directly toward Titanic. For several tense moments, it appeared that the maiden voyage might end before it had truly begun. Crew members shouted orders. Tugboats rushed into position. Engines were reversed. Passengers watched silently as the distance between the two ships narrowed. Had they collided, history might have unfolded very differently. At the last possible moment, disaster was avoided. The New York was pulled clear. Titanic continued her journey. Many later viewed this incident as little more than an interesting coincidence. Others would remember it as an eerie warning, a reminder that even before reaching the open Atlantic, fate had already tested the great ship once. Few paid much attention. The excitement quickly returned. After leaving Southampton, Titanic stopped briefly at Cherbourg, France, where additional passengers boarded using small tender boats. Among them were wealthy American families returning home after extended stays in Europe. Expensive automobiles were loaded into the cargo hold. Fine wines, rare artwork, jewelry worth fortunes. Everything about Titanic reflected confidence. Nothing suggested danger. From Cherbourg, the ship sailed toward Queenstown, Ireland, known today as Cobh, for one final stop. Hundreds more passengers boarded. Many were young families beginning entirely new lives across the Atlantic. Some paused on deck to take one last look at the green coastline of Ireland fading into the distance. Few realized it would be the final glimpse of home they would ever see. By the afternoon of April 11th, Titanic finally turned westward into the vast Atlantic Ocean. Ahead lay nearly 3,000 miles of open sea. Behind her remained Europe. For the first time, there would be no more ports, no more passengers, no more opportunities to turn back. The voyage that had captured the world's imagination was now truly underway. And somewhere far beyond the horizon, hidden among the freezing currents of the North Atlantic, ancient mountains of ice drifted silently southward, carried by forces no human could control. Neither the passengers nor the officers on the bridge could possibly know that every passing hour was bringing those two worlds closer together. For the first 2 days, everything unfolded almost exactly as everyone had hoped. Titanic moved steadily across the Atlantic with remarkable smoothness. Despite her enormous size, many passengers were surprised by how little the ship seemed to move. Even those who had experienced seasickness on previous voyages found themselves comfortably walking the decks. The weather remained clear. The sea was calm. Each sunrise revealed an endless horizon where the ocean met the sky in a perfect line, interrupted only by the occasional seabird or the distant silhouette of another vessel. Life aboard Titanic quickly settled into a comfortable routine. In first class, mornings often began with breakfast served in elegant dining rooms, decorated with polished wood, white tablecloths, and silver cutlery. Wealthy passengers discussed business opportunities, politics, art, and the future of Europe while waiters quietly moved between tables with impeccable precision. Later, many took long walks along the promenade deck. Some gathered in the reading and writing room, sending letters that they expected to mail upon arriving in New York. Others relaxed in luxurious lounges, enjoying tea while a small orchestra performed soft music nearby. The grand staircase became the heart of first-class life. Its sweeping oak railings, intricate ironwork, and magnificent glass dome symbolized everything White Star Line had hoped to achieve. Passengers frequently paused there simply to admire the craftsmanship or to have their photographs taken. Below deck, the atmosphere was very different, but no less vibrant. Second-class passengers enjoyed accommodations that many other ships reserve for first class. Teachers, merchants, engineers, and middle-class families spent their days reading, talking, or strolling the open decks. For many, the voyage itself was already an unforgettable experience. Meanwhile, in third class, life was filled with anticipation. Entire families gathered in common rooms, sharing meals and stories about the lives they hoped to build in America. Children chased one another through the corridors. Musicians played lively folk songs from Ireland, Scandinavia, and Eastern Europe. People who had never met before danced together, laughed together, and dreamed together. Although separated by class, every passenger shared the same destination, New York. Few people gave much thought to danger. Why would they? Titanic seemed to confirm every promise that had been made before her departure. She was stable, she was comfortable. She appeared almost invincible. Above them, the ship's 4 towering funnels continuously released streams of smoke into the cold Atlantic air, while deep below the waterline, hundreds of stokers worked relentlessly in temperatures that often exceeded 45 degrees Celsius. Hidden from the passenger's view, these men shoveled tons of coal into enormous furnaces hour after hour. The engine rooms thundered with incredible power. Massive pistons rose and fell without interruption. Steam rushed through countless pipes. Every minute required perfect coordination. The comfort enjoyed on the upper decks depended entirely upon the exhausting labor taking place below. Most passengers never saw these men. Many never even considered the immense effort required to keep a ship of Titanic's size moving across the ocean. To them, the voyage seemed effortless. Yet every mile traveled required extraordinary human endurance. As daylight faded each evening, another routine began. Electric lights illuminated the corridors. The orchestra performed elegant selections before dinner. Conversations filled the dining rooms. Crystal glasses reflected the warm glow of chandeliers. Outside, however, the Atlantic remained silent. The ocean revealed little of what lay ahead. Far to the north, enormous glaciers had slowly broken away from Greenland during the previous months. Driven by powerful ocean currents, countless icebergs drifted south into shipping lanes, commonly used by transatlantic liners during the spring. To experienced sailors, this was nothing unusual. Every year, captains received reports warning them about dangerous ice conditions. Normally, ships simply adjusted their routes when necessary. No one imagined that these familiar warnings would soon become the center of one of history's greatest maritime disasters. Because while passengers laughed over dinner, while children slept peacefully in their cabins, while musicians played cheerful melodies beneath glittering lights, a series of wireless messages was already crossing the Atlantic. Messages that would soon reach Titanic's bridge. Messages carrying a single word that every experienced captain respected: ice. Wireless communication was still a relatively new technology in 1912. Only a decade earlier, the idea of sending messages through the air without wires had seemed almost magical. Now, thanks to the Marconi wireless system, ships hundreds of miles apart could exchange information almost instantly. For passengers, the wireless room represented a modern convenience. They could send personal messages to loved ones across the ocean. Brief notes announcing safe departures, business updates, or simple expressions of affection that would be delivered before they even reached America. But for the officers on the bridge, the wireless system served a far more important purpose. It was a lifeline. Every day, ships shared reports about weather conditions, storms, mechanical problems, drifting wreckage, and during the spring months, ice. On April 12th, less than 24 hours after leaving Ireland, Titanic received one of its first ice reports. Another ship sailing farther north warned of floating ice along parts of the Atlantic route. The message was acknowledged. It was neither shocking nor unexpected. Captain Edward John Smith had spent decades at sea. He had encountered ice many times throughout his career. Experienced captains understood that ice fields shifted constantly. Reports from one vessel did not always reflect conditions several hours later, or many miles away. The voyage continued. Throughout April 13th, additional messages arrived, one after another. Different ships, different positions, yet many carried the same warning: sea ice, growlers, large icebergs, pack ice. Each report painted a similar picture. The North Atlantic was becoming increasingly dangerous. Some of these warnings reached the bridge immediately. Others were handed directly to Captain Smith. One message was marked on a navigation chart, so the officers could monitor the reported ice positions. Nothing about this process appeared unusual. Ships exchanged such information regularly. At the time, no international system existed requiring every warning to be treated with the same urgency. Captains relied upon experience, judgment, and changing conditions. Meanwhile, life aboard Titanic remained almost unchanged. Passengers continued enjoying concerts. Children played games on deck beneath bright spring sunshine. Elegant dinners stretched late into the evening. The contrast was extraordinary. Above deck, comfort and celebration. Across the wireless network, increasing concern. As April 14th began, Titanic entered her fourth day at sea. The morning arrived clear and cold. Breakfast was served precisely as usual. Crew members cleaned the decks. Stewards prepared cabins. Engineers monitored the massive machinery hidden deep inside the ship. Nothing suggested that history was only hours away. Yet the wireless room never became quiet. Operators Jack Phillips and Harold Bride worked almost continuously. Their equipment handled both official navigation messages and hundreds of personal telegrams sent by passengers eager to communicate with family, friends, and business partners. The workload became overwhelming. Earlier, a temporary equipment failure had delayed many outgoing messages. Now the operators were racing to clear the backlog before reaching New York. As a result, the wireless room remained busier than ever. Throughout the day, more ice warnings arrived. One message described large icebergs directly ahead of Titanic's intended course. Another reported heavy fields of drifting ice. Each transmission added another piece to an increasingly troubling picture. Some warnings reached the bridge immediately. Others were delayed while the operators prioritized the growing queue of passenger telegrams. It was not negligence. It was simply the way the system functioned in 1912. No one aboard believed they were making a catastrophic mistake. Late that afternoon, the sun slowly descended toward the western horizon. The air grew noticeably colder. Passengers walking the promenade deck wrapped themselves in heavier coats. Some commented on the unusual chill. Others admired the crystal-clear sky. It was one of the calmest evenings imaginable. Ironically, the very conditions that made the night seem so peaceful would soon make icebergs far more difficult to detect. With almost no wind, the ocean surface remained remarkably smooth. Normally, waves breaking against the base of an iceberg created white foam that could be seen from a distance. That night, there would be almost no waves. The sea would become a dark mirror, and against that mirror, a black iceberg beneath a moonless sky would blend almost perfectly into the surrounding darkness. No one standing on Titanic's decks could have understood how dangerous such perfect conditions truly were. They saw beauty. The officers saw calm seas. The passengers saw endless stars. But hidden within that breathtaking silence, nature was preparing its final test. As darkness settled over the Atlantic, the temperature continued to fall. By nightfall, many passengers had returned indoors, leaving the open decks unusually quiet. A sharp, dry cold hung in the air. Those who remained outside often remarked that they had never seen so many stars. There was no moon. Without its light, the sky appeared deeper than anyone could remember. Thousands of stars reflected faintly across the perfectly still ocean, making it difficult to distinguish where the sea ended and the heavens began. It was beautiful. It was peaceful. And it was dangerously deceptive. At approximately 7:30 p.m., another wireless message arrived. It came from the steamship Californian, reporting large icebergs directly in the path of westbound ships. The warning was forwarded to the bridge. Again, the information was noted. Captain Edward Smith had already altered Titanic's course slightly earlier in the voyage to avoid the heaviest reported ice fields. He believed the ship remained on a safe route. Nothing yet suggested immediate danger. Dinner that evening was as elegant as ever. In first class, guests enjoyed an elaborate multi-course meal, served beneath sparkling chandeliers. Conversations drifted from politics to finance, from travel to the latest technological achievements. Laughter echoed through the dining room. A string orchestra filled the air with gentle music. Some passengers later recalled it as one of the finest evenings of their lives. Elsewhere, card games continued long after sunset. Couples walked slowly along the promenade deck. Children, exhausted from another exciting day aboard the world's largest ship, slept peacefully in their cabins. Far below, in the boiler rooms, the rhythm never stopped. Hundreds of stokers continued feeding coal into the roaring furnaces. Sweat poured from their faces despite the freezing ocean only meters away beyond the steel hull. Every shovel of coal helped maintain Titanic's speed. At around 22 knots, she was moving steadily toward New York. To modern readers, one question often arises. Why didn't Titanic simply slow down? The answer lies in the thinking of the time. Ocean liners regularly maintained high speeds, even when ice had been reported nearby. Captains relied on lookouts, clear visibility, and their ability to change course if necessary. There was no radar, no satellite imagery, no thermal cameras. The human eye remained the most important navigation tool after sunset. High above the deck, inside the crow's nest attached to the forward mast, two lookouts, Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee, stood watch in the freezing darkness. Hour after hour, they scanned the endless horizon. Their instructions were simple. Watch for anything unusual. Another ship, floating wreckage, or ice. The cold became almost unbearable. Their breath formed white clouds in the air. The metal beneath their boots grew slick with frost. Adding to the difficulty, the lookouts did not have binoculars. Contrary to popular belief, binoculars were normally helpful, but not always essential at night. Experienced sailors often relied more heavily on their eyesight in darkness. Still, many historians have debated whether binoculars might have helped under certain conditions. Regardless, Fleet and Lee remained completely focused. Minute after minute, they stared into a darkness that seemed endless. At 9:40 p.m., another warning arrived. This one came from the Masaba. Its message was among the clearest yet. It described extensive ice, large icebergs, and dangerous pack ice directly across sections of the shipping lane ahead. Unlike some earlier reports, this warning painted an unmistakable picture of significant hazards, but the wireless operators aboard Titanic were overwhelmed with passenger traffic. Jack Phillips was working furiously to transmit delayed personal messages to a station in Newfoundland. When the Masaba warning arrived, it was received, but it never reached the bridge. Not because anyone ignored it, not because anyone intended to hide it, simply because the operators were occupied with what seemed, at that moment, to be equally urgent work. It was one small decision among thousands made during the voyage. No one could possibly know that history would later examine that moment in extraordinary detail. The night grew colder still. The sea remained perfectly flat. The stars shone brighter than ever. And somewhere ahead, hidden in the darkness, a mountain of ancient ice drifted silently across Titanic's path, carried by currents that had begun their journey thousands of years before. Neither the passengers enjoying the warmth inside, nor the musicians finishing another performance, nor the officers calmly supervising the bridge, could yet see what lay directly ahead. But within the next hour, everything would change forever. It was now just after 11 o'clock. Most passengers had retired to their cabins. The first-class lounges, bustling with conversation only an hour earlier, had grown quiet. The orchestra had finished its evening performance, waiters cleared the last glasses from the dining rooms, and the ship settled into the peaceful rhythm of another ordinary night at sea. On the bridge, however, the officers remained fully alert. Second Officer Charles Lightoller had completed his watch and handed responsibility to First Officer William Murdoch, one of the most experienced officers aboard Titanic. Before leaving, Lightoller made a brief but important remark. "The night is getting colder." It was more than casual conversation. Experienced sailors understood exactly what such temperatures could mean in the North Atlantic.